identify him for the jury? In court today.
I do.
Can you identify him for the jury?
Sitting there in the yellow shirt.
Can you describe something else other than his shirt?
He's bearded, wearing glasses and a yarmulke.
All right. Your Honor, at this point, I would ask the record to reflect that the witnesses identified the defendant as Hemy Neuman.
The record may so reflect.
Ms. Hannison, as you see the defendant today, is there anything different about his appearance today as it was than what it was when you worked with him at GE?
I haven't seen him with a beard before.
You haven't seen him with the beard before?
Correct.
All right. Other than that, does he appear pretty much the same?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about Mr. Neuman. When did you meet the defendant, Hemy Neuman?
I first met him around September 2000.
And how did you meet him?
I was sent on assignment to Israel to an acquisition that GE had made, and he was working at that office at the time.
In Israel?
In Israel.
Okay. What was your position in Israel? I
was the HR integration leader for this acquisition that we had made.
Okay. And what was the defendant's position in Israel?
I think at the time he was head of quality, but quality and engineering, something like that, but I can't remember exactly.
Or what was, I guess, the professional relationship, the pecking order, the ranking between yourself and the defendant at that time?
Pretty much peers. We were on the leadership committee, in the leadership panel there.
Did you and the defendant develop a friendship while you worked with him in Israel?
Only in the office, from what I saw of him in the office, just sort of socially in the office, no more than that.
At that time? All
Correct.
Right. The days that you would see him in the office in the early 2000s back in Israel, did you ever notice anything unusual about him?
No, not at all.
All right. How would you describe his demeanor and his work ethic during that time period?
I have always known him as being extremely hardworking, very strong work ethic, very dedicated, very professional.
All right. At some point, did you leave Israel?
I did. I was there for about 20 months, and so I left around the summer of 2002 and came to the U.S.
Came to the U.S.
Right.
Was the defendant, Hemy Neuman, still in Israel when you left Israel?
He was.
All right. At some point, did the defendant come to the United States where you were?
He did, yes.
Okay. And when I say where you were, where was that? Where in the United States?
Here in Atlanta, for what was then called the GE Energy business.
Okay. What was your job when you came to the United States?
So I've had a number of different jobs. At the time that Hemy came over, I was the senior HR manager for the engineering function in one of our businesses.
And when the defendant came over, I believe you said in 2002?
Well, I came over in 2002. He came over a little after that. I can't remember the exact year.
Okay. When the defendant came over, what was his job?
He came into the engineering function as well as the head of quality for engineering.
Okay. Now, were you still peers, or was there a different
Yes.
relationship? You were still peers at this point?
Correct.
Okay. At some point when you all were in Atlanta together, during this time period that you just described,
Right.
did you and Hemy Neuman develop a relationship, a friendship?
We would see each other in the office between travel times, so we would chat about the children. Before Relly and his children came over from Israel, they stayed so the children could finish school for a few months. He came over on his own. He came to my home for Thanksgiving. I had a number of friends, invited him for Thanksgiving. When Relly arrived, they came to my home for a meal. I went to their house a couple of times, and then in the office we were friendly. We would chat almost on a daily basis.
Okay, so you used the word Relly.
Sorry, his wife.
His wife?
Yes.
What is his wife's name?
Relly Neuman.
Relly Neuman. Okay, did you know his wife as well?
Through those social interactions.
All right. How long were you and the defendant here in Atlanta together?
So probably around 3 years or so, and then I moved to Houston.
Okay, what year did you move to Houston?
In 2008, I believe it was.
So you were with the defendant here in Atlanta until 2008?
Correct.
All right, let me ask you, before we move on to Houston,
Right.
let me ask you about your observations of the defendant during the year 2008.
Right.
Did you notice anything off about the defendant in 2008?
No, not at all.
All right. Did you notice any depression?
No.
All right. Were things normal with the defendant as far as you could tell in 2008?
As far as I was aware, yes.
How often did you have conversations with him?
So I travelled a fair amount, and Hemy travelled some, so we would probably see each other most days in the office when neither of us were travelling.
Your Honor, if I may approach the board.
Mr. James, does the witness need to be able to see the board because she can't, the screen is blocking her view?
Not at this point, Your Honor. Not at this
Go ahead.
point. So you said in 2008 things seemed normal with the defendant.
Right.
Now, after you left the office in 2008, you said you went to Houston, was it?
I did, yes.
What was your job in Houston?
So I moved to GE Oil and Gas as what was called the organisation and staffing leader,
Okay.
also within the HR function.
Did you keep contact with Hemy Neuman during that time period?
Not very much, no.
All right. When was the next time you saw Hemy Neuman face to face after you moved to Houston in 2008?
So in September of 2010, he came to Houston for a meeting, and we met up for dinner on one evening in 2010.
In September of 2010?
September 2010.
All right. Your Honor, if I may move freely back and
Yes,
forth
sir.
in the board. Okay.
Move about as you need.
September 28th.
Tell me about your observations and of the defendant. Well, before we go there, did you in fact meet with the defendant on September the 20th of 2010?
I did. We met up for dinner that
Okay.
evening.
When you say you met up, did you ride with him? Did he ride by himself and you rode by yourself?
No, I picked him up from the hotel.
Okay. So let's talk about when you picked him up from the hotel.
Right.
Did you have a conversation once he got into the car?
Well, yes. I mean, he started the conversation by asking if I wanted to talk about his private life first or about his work issues.
If you wanted to talk about his private life first or his work issues.
Right.
And this was September the 28th of 2010.
Correct.
Did you form an impression based on what he said?
Well, my answer to him was, if you're going to tell me you're having an affair and you're leaving Raleigh, I don't want to have that conversation.
Now, what made you say, if you're going to tell me if you're having an affair and leaving Raleigh, I don't want to have that conversation? All he said was...
Right, but a middle-aged man starts a conversation like that. It doesn't take a lot of common sense to figure out that that's where he was going to go with it. I had no knowledge, I had no specific reason other than it was just an unusual thing for a middle-aged man to start a conversation with.
So when you said this to him when he gets in the car, how does he respond?
He sort of laughed and said, "How did you know?"
He laughed.
Yeah.
Okay. And when he said, "How did you know?" how did you respond?
Well, I said just that, I mean, it doesn't take a genius to figure out. A middle-aged man gets into my car and that's how you start the conversation. It doesn't take a genius to figure it out.
What, if anything, did you say next?
I said, I don't want to have that conversation. That's nothing to do with me, so don't want to talk about that. So he said, okay, we'll talk about the work issues. I'm fine.
Did you all, in fact, talk about the work issues at that point?
We did.
All right. Tell us about that.
So Hemy was very good at the job he did and had been wanting a promotion to our executive band and was very frustrated that it wasn't happening for him and wanted to talk about why it wasn't and what advice I could give him about that.
Now, were you all still in the car or were you all arrived at dinner at this point?
Both. We started the conversation in the car and we continued it when we got to the restaurant.
Did you, in fact, give him advice on how to improve his chances in advancement in the company?
We talked somewhat about his interview style and how he could do better in an interview situation.
What did you say to him?
I actually don't remember details of that part of the conversation. I'm afraid it was a while ago, so...
Can you tell us whether or not you gave him advice?
Yes.
Can you tell us whether or not you gave some criticism as a part of that advice?
I don't remember that I gave any particular criticism as such, no.
How did he receive what you told him?
He listened very attentively. He was always appreciative of feedback, and he always took it well.
Okay, now were you all at dinner at this point?
Yes.
All right. So what happens next after you give him the advice, the work advice?
So then he clearly wanted to progress to tell me about his personal issues.
Okay, so when you say he clearly wanted to tell you about his personal issues, how do you know that?
I mean, that was immediately the topic that he went into as soon as we finished the discussion about the work issues.
Okay, so you said earlier that you didn't want to hear about it,
Yeah.
and now you're progressing into it. So did you still say you didn't want to hear about it? How did you handle that?
Well, he started first of all to talk about his issues with his wife and the debts that she had allegedly that he claimed that she had got them into.
Okay,
so it was a gentle sort of.
So let me stop you there. He started talking about his wife and the debt.
Right.
All right. Tell us what he told you about his wife and the debt.
So he told me that things between him and Relly were not good, and that she had got them into debts through lifestyle excessive spending, but he didn't go into details about exactly how, or that I don't recall him going into details about how.
But the defendant, Hemy Neuman, told you that his wife got them into debt.
Correct, that's what he
Because
said.
of her excessive spending.
Yes.
All right. Now, when he tells you this about his wife getting them into debt, how do you respond?
I don't recall that I responded much to that at all.
Okay. What, if anything else, did he say about the debt at this point?
He said that by then he had managed to overcome the debt, but he didn't go into details about how, and I didn't ask.
So, this is September 28th of 2010.
Correct.
And the defendant, Hemy Neuman, tells you at this point he had managed to get beyond the debt.
Right.
So what do y'all talk about next?
He then started to get more personal about his relationship with Relly, and that he was very unhappy and was considering leaving her. And then he went on to tell me that he had been in a relationship with a younger woman.
Did you ask him who this younger woman was?
I did not.
Did he offer who she was?
He told me that she was younger than him, that she was Jewish, that she had 2 young children, and that she was probably going to stay with her husband because of the children.
Okay, so let me back up a little bit. She was younger than him, and that she had 2 younger children.
She had 2 young children.
Did he indicate that they had children together?
Oh, no.
He
Not
said
at
she
all.
had 2 younger children.
Correct.
So, he's telling you this. What are you doing? How are you responding?
To be honest, I said very little. The only question I asked him was, does she work at GE?
Why did you ask him that?
Because we have very strict rules about relationships between employees, especially when there's a direct reporting line. And I think he probably realized I would have reported him for it if I would have known.
So because of your job?
Because of my job. Well, yes, anybody in GE should report it, actually, not just because of my job, but certainly because of that.
What would happen if it had been reported that Mr. Neuman was having an affair, a sexual relationship with a subordinate?
So Typically, there would be an investigation, and if it was substantiated in the past, we have dismissed typically the manager.
Was Mr. Neuman, in fact, the manager in this relationship?
He was.
And when you asked Mr. Neuman if this woman that he was having a relationship with worked for GE, how did he respond?
He said she did not.
Did he tell you anything else about this relationship?
Not that I can recall at the moment.
What did you say? I mean, he's told you that he's having a relationship, and you know him, you know his wife. Do you finally respond at some point?
So he, when he stopped talking, and he looks at me, and I said, are you wanting a response? Because if you ask me my opinion, you're going to get a fairly honest answer. And he said, no, I value your friendship, I value your opinion. And I said, I think you're stupid. You're going through a midlife crisis. You're thinking with part of your anatomy and not with your brain. And if you
I'm
can't...
sorry, I didn't hear your last response.
I said, that he was thinking with a certain part of his anatomy rather than with his brain, and that if you can't go home and look your children in the eye and tell them that you've done everything you can to save your marriage, you haven't been to counselling or anything with Relly, then you need to go home and do that first.
And when you said this to him, how did he respond?
He laughed a little bit.
He laughed?
Like a sort of embarrassed kind of laugh.
Okay. So, how did the conversation turn at this point? Did you all keep talking about this, or did you talk about other things?
That was the end of that part of the conversation.
All right. Tell us about, let's transition a little bit. Mm-hmm. Tell us about the next time you and Mr. Neuman saw one another.
So this was in September, and in November I moved back to Atlanta. I took another job with a different division of GE. This was Thanksgiving week. And the day that I moved in, I was in my new office unpacking, and he came in to see me, to say hello and to welcome me back.
Do you have a rough idea around what day it may have been?
It would have been early that week, Thanksgiving week, so probably the Monday or the Tuesday of that week.
The Monday or the Tuesday of Thanksgiving, November 2010.
Correct.
Do you, just from your recollection, do you know whether or not this was before or after November the 18th?
It would have been just slightly after, I believe, because it was the Monday of Thanksgiving week.
Okay. So when you see him, it's after November the 18th, 2010, it's beginning of the week.
Right.
Are you all at GE offices? Are you in his office?
No, he came into my office.
He came to your office?
Right.
All right. Tell us about the conversation, if you all had one at all.
So he came in and he gave me a hug and welcomed me back and said it was nice to have me back and we must do lunch. And he told me that he had left the family home, and he was living with a woman he jokingly called his girlfriend. And when I asked him who that was, he said it was an older woman, I think in her 80s, I believe, who had taken him in. He had been staying at a hotel. He'd run out of money to do that, and she had given him a room in her house, and that he was staying there.
When you say he was living with a woman that he was jokingly calling his girlfriend, what do you mean by joking?
Well, I mean, she was a much older lady, and I think that's what when he referred to her as his girlfriend, it was not a serious comment.
What was his demeanor? What led you to believe that it wasn't a serious comment?
He was sort of smiling and just laughing a little bit.
He was
just in a
smiling.
very casual kind of way, yeah.
He was smiling and laughing a little
Right.
bit. How would you describe his demeanor at this point?
There was nothing that struck me as strange. It was no different than I had seen him behave on other occasions.
Would it be fair to say that he was upbeat?
Positive, but not like hysterically positive, but yeah, positive and chirpy.
Okay. Tell us about the next conversation that you all had.
So a few weeks later, sort of over the Christmas break, I heard on the grapevine that he was unwell and had been taken to hospital and he'd had surgery. So I emailed him to see if he was okay and whether there was anything I could do, and he called me to say that he'd had some exploratory surgery, that they weren't sure what was wrong with him, and he was leaving hospital and he was going to go and stay with his mother in Florida to recuperate.
Now, you said he emailed you. Was the entire conversation over email, or did you all actually?
No, I had emailed him, and then he called me from the hospital. I think it was from the hospital that he phoned me.
So you all spoke on the phone?
We did.
Now, this time you weren't face to face because you were speaking on the phone.
Correct.
What did he sound like? What did his demeanor sound like?
Difficult to tell over the phone. I mean, it sounded, I'd say, lower energy. But I took that because he was in hospital and had just had surgery, so I didn't attribute anything else to that.
Do you remember if this was before or after Christmas?
I don't remember. It was probably between Christmas and New Year, because that's the time typically I would have taken off, and it was during the time I wasn't at work, but I can't tell you exactly.
Fair enough. The next conversation that you and he had, can you tell us about that, when that was?
New Year's Eve, Hemy called me to wish me a Happy New Year. And he told me he was on his way down to Florida with the girls. I assumed that he meant his daughters. And that was the last time that I have spoken to him.
This was New Year's Eve?
New Year's Eve.
Of what
2010.
Year? Of 2010. Can you tell us about how he sounded? What was his demeanor?
He sounded fairly positive again. I mean, nothing that I could tell from an emotional perspective one way or the other, sort of fairly, what I would say, normal Hemy.
Okay, so last time you said positive but not hysterical.
Right.
So are we talking about positive way on one end, or what are we talking about here?
So I've known Hemy for a long time. That there's never been a positive way on one end or a negative way on one end. Hemy has always been a fairly sort of steady guy. So his positive is a smile and a laugh, and that's it. It's very difficult to judge. I've never seen wild extremes of emotions from him.
And that's how he appeared on New Year's Eve of 2010?
Correct.
Your Honor, if I could have just a second.
You may.
Nothing further at this point, Your Honor.
All right. You may cross-examine if you wish.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You're welcome.
Good morning, Ms. Hannison. My name is Dewana Sampson. Now, you said you initially met Hemy in Israel, correct?
Right.
And at that time, you never went to his home. He never came to your home. That was all later in Atlanta.
That's
right?
correct.
Now, when you knew him in Israel and when you knew him in Atlanta, he was always a fairly private person, correct?
Well, we would always chat about family and children, and about his frustrations at work. So from that perspective, no, I mean, he would tell me things, but other than that, it was really no more than that.
Okay. He's certainly not someone who shows his emotion or shares his emotion.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Now, in 2008, when you knew him, did you talk to him about his projects and what he was specifically doing for GE?
We would have had those conversations.
Okay. Do you remember him taking on some extra duties and some extra projects?
I do, but I don't remember the details of what they were.
Okay. But during that time, he was taking on extra work, correct?
Yes, his job expanded, yes.
And when you say his job expanded, did he basically for a brief time take on essentially two separate jobs?
I seem to recall he did have sort of double duty.
Okay. And during that time, he was working a lot of extra hours because of that?
He probably was. It's not uncommon in our company for that to happen, so I would have assumed he would have done.
Certainly he had extra duties, so
Yes.
somehow he had to get that done.
Right.
And he was getting those done, right?
Yes.
And he was always someone that had the energy to get things done and
Yes.
to work extra hours,
Yes.
correct? Now, when you met with him in Houston, at that point, you hadn't seen each other in several years, correct?
Probably about 2 years, yes.
And he was out there on a trip for business. He didn't come specifically to see you.
That's
right?
correct.
And when you first agreed to meet him for dinner, what did you think this meeting was going to be about, or this conversation was going to be about?
No, I just thought it was just going to be a general catch-up because we hadn't seen each other for a while.
And when he started talking about personal problems and financial problems, that wasn't really something you were comfortable with, correct?
Correct.
And he also talked to you about a promotion he was hoping to get?
He did.
And was there a specific promotion he was trying for?
To be honest, I don't remember.
Okay. Do you remember him talking about a review or concerns about a review?
I don't remember that.
But you do remember he told you he was having marital problems.
He did.
And he said that they'd been having marital problems for a long time?
I don't know that he was specific about how long.
Okay, but he didn't say this is a new thing.
He did not.
And he actually went into some details about their sex life?
He did.
And that was not at all the type of conversations you had had in the past, correct?
That's correct.
And he was not the type of person to share. In the past, he had never been with you the type of person to share that kind of personal details, correct?
Correct.
And he indicated he was having an affair, correct?
He did.
And he talked about how passionate that affair was?
He did.
And that she was giving him things his wife couldn't give him?
He did.
And that she was younger?
Yes.
And he also said she was married, but he didn't think she would leave her husband.
That's correct.
And he told you that she had young children.
He did.
And in talking to you about all these different things, he was kind of jumping from one topic to another on his own. In other words, you weren't asking him questions about this. You weren't trying to get him to give you more detail. He was just kind of going.
Yes, I mean, I didn't take it as jumping from one topic to another because it was all the same topic, really, but it was unprompted by me, certainly.
Okay. So basically, he got on this topic and he was talking, and you weren't asking questions, you weren't encouraging him, he was just talking.
That's correct. The only question I asked, as I said earlier, was about whether or not she worked for GE.
And if he had admitted that this was a GE employee, that would have put you in a bad position, correct?
Yes, I mean, my actions would have been fairly clear, but yes, it would have been awkward, but I would have had to have reported it.
And you have no doubt that you would have reported it.
Oh, no doubt at all.
And he certainly, knowing you for all that time, should have known that you would report it.
I would assume he would have known that.
Now, your conversation with him about these relationships, that was maybe an hour?
I'd be speculating at this stage. That's probably not inaccurate, but I can't tell you exactly now.
Okay, but somewhere in that area. It wasn't just 10 minutes.
Oh, no, it was a longer conversation.
And during that conversation, he did 99% of the speaking.
Yes.
And that also was not typical for him, right?
No, I mean, I'd known Hemy to be fairly chatty in the past, so it wasn't that it was atypical.
But would he typically just talk without getting any feedback, without any give and take? Would he just go off on a topic like that?
So our previous conversations in the office had been work-related, and they were much more interactive because of the nature of the topic, I think.
Okay.
There wasn't much I could say about what he was telling me.
Right. But certainly you'd never had another situation where he just went on about some topic that wasn't work-related for that length of time without any interaction.
Not that I can recall.
Okay. And he's certainly not the sort of hyperverbal, just keep talking type of person, correct?
Correct.
Now, after you met with him in Houston, his wife called you, is that right?
She did.
And she had never called you before except times to ask you to dinner or something like that?
Correct.
And you hadn't had any contact with her in at least 2 years, correct?
That's true, yeah.
Did that make sense to you that she was calling you?
As soon as she told me why she was calling me, it made sense, yes.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may.
On cross, counsel asked you about the defendant's job expanding,
Yes.
and your response was, it's not uncommon for that to happen.
Right.
Can you explain what you mean by that?
Pretty much at a sort of more senior leadership level, a lot of people take on extra work. He was doing a lot, but that's not uncommon. A lot of us do more than one job sometimes.
So it wasn't anything unusual or irregular that someone at his level would take on extra work?
Correct.
And to your knowledge and understanding, when other people on the senior leadership level take on extra work, are they able to carry out those tasks and duties with proficiency?
Yes, I mean, usually you ask the people who you figure are going to be able to get the work done to do it.
But he's not the only one.
No, he's not the only one.
You also indicated that you've known Hemy to be fairly chatty. Those were your words.
Yeah, I mean, we've had lots of conversations historically. Yes.
So he's not. When you talk, he doesn't clam up and not say anything.
No. No.
He responds normal in conversation.
Correct.
All right. And he can talk long periods of time when y'all talk.
Yes.
Counsel also asked you about the September the 28th conversation, and I think she indicated that he sort of went on and on and on and on.
Yes.
And that you didn't really get a word in edgewise much, you didn't respond.
Well, I didn't try to get it right. It wasn't a discussion. I didn't want this to be an interactive conversation, so it wasn't that I tried to jump in and say anything.
So you weren't trying to respond?
No, it wasn't that he was talking over me or anything.
Was there anything abnormal or irregular about the pace of that conversation that y'all were having on the 28th of September?
Not that struck me at the time.
I don't have anything further, Your Honor.
Any recross?
Now, you said a lot of us at some point in our career take on more than one job, but in 2008, that was a new thing for Hemy, that he was taking on these extra jobs, correct?
I don't know that.
Well, before he only had the one set of duties, and then he took on these additional duties at that time.
But I don't know what he had done historically prior to that. I have no knowledge of that.
I'm not asking you at any point in the past had he ever taken on extra duties, but he had a set of duties,
Yes.
and then in 2008 he took on a bunch of additional duties. These weren't things that he already had.
I think this is asking an answer. She's already gone down this line of questioning on direct examination.
For the purpose of this, I'm going to overrule if for right now.
Yes, sir.
I will allow her to ask this question at this time, one more time. Go ahead.
Okay. So in 2008, he had one set of duties, and then he took on an entire new set of duties in addition to what he already
Correct.
had. So that was new then.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, sir.
Lawyers, may this witness be released and excused from her subpoena, or do you want her to remain on the stand?
Yes, Your Honor. She may be released.
Any objection, Ms. Sampson? No, Your Honor. You're free to go. Have a good day.
you.
Drive safely. All right, next witness.
All right, this time the state calls James Bono.
You come on up, sir.
Go ahead and have a seat, folks. Then raise your right hand. You solemnly swear in front of the testimony shall give this court to be the truth, no truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
You may go ahead. Please state and spell your name for the record.
My name is James, James, G, Bono, V as in Victor, O-N-O,
Mr. Bono, where are you employed?
at General Electric.
Okay, and how long have you been there?
25 years of continuous service, came over as part of an acquisition.
Okay, and what is your current position?
I'm currently the acting global repairs leader for power services.
Could you explain a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, I'm acting because unfortunately my boss is out with an illness, so I'm in position covering for her while she's out.
Okay, can you explain what that job entails?
Yes, ma'am. We repair gas turbine, steam turbine, generator, and boiler components that go into power plants that generate electricity, and also do industrial work.
Okay, and are you located here in the Atlanta office?
Yes, ma'am. I'm at 4200 Wildwood.
Okay, and how long have you worked in the Atlanta office?
Since October of 2007.
Okay. Now, back in 2010, you were here in the Atlanta office then?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and did you know Hemy Neuman?
I did.
How long at that point had you known him? Had you known him from the time that you came in 2007 straight through to 2010?
Yes, I was the quality leader for energy services when I came here in 2007, and started working with Hemy around about October, November of that year, until I believe August of 2010, when I took a new role to run repairs, field services for the Americas and power gen services.
Okay.
So what year was that?
2010 is when I took the new job, August of 2010.
What I'm going to do, this is a good pausing point, ladies and gentlemen. As I indicated, I'm going to give you routine breaks. You're going to have to keep an open mind. And do not discuss the case or allow anyone to discuss the case with you. As indicated, if you do decide to have a meal here in the cater, do not sit next to anyone who may be discussing the case or allow anyone to sit next to you who may be discussing the case. You always have two options, either A, move away from them, or B, move away from you. Now, you're going to leave your notepads there in the jury room. Just leave them face down. You're going to continue to wear your badges. As indicated when you're outside, you may want to take those off, or put those badges back on when you come back into the building, and keep them with you at all times. When I release you for this break, do not remain upon the fifth floor, because I don't want you to interact with anyone you should not interact with, or interact with anyone you should not interact with, anything you should not hear. Do not read or look at any media coverage pertaining to this case. Do not go upon the internet and do any research about this case. Do not blog or write about this case while it's ongoing. Do not go to any location that may or may not be made reference to during the course of the trial. All the evidence must come to you in the form of sworn testimony from this witness stand and or any evidence that is introduced during the course of the trial. You're more than welcome to bring something to snack in or eat a few during the afternoon breaks. All the breaks, as you're going to find out pretty quickly, will be relatively short, in the neighborhood of 10 minutes or less, with the exception of this break. Do not consume any alcoholic beverages during the lunch break. When you come back from this break, make sure you turn your cell phones in the off position so that they will not, cell phone communication device in the off position so that they will not be going off during the afternoon session. Also, this is your opportunity to check any emails, voicemails, or any texts that you may have at this point in time. This is also the time in which if you want to make any arrangements, because you're going to be with us throughout this afternoon, but this is the time to go ahead and make those arrangements while allowing you to use your communication devices. That way you won't have to send me a note saying, Judge, I didn't make a telephone call, because this is that time to make those telephone calls and communication at this point in time, and your phones will be gathered up from you at the conclusion of this break. The lawyers and the parties and the witnesses or potential witnesses cannot talk or interact with you, but I don't ever want you to think they're being rude or discourteous, although you may see them out and about, but don't talk with them and they won't talk to you. Now, the way we're going to operate, you can be early, but you cannot be late.